to get endorsement, to get support, to continue on infrastructure and how we're going to pay that. The public has to support these things for us to move forward because they are very expensive. And then I think we're going to continue to see, as Japan has, as the U.S. had, number 10, in responding to worldwide calamities and problems. It's expensive, and it has to be done very quickly. Next. So, estimation on infrastructure. There are a lot of zeros there, many zeros. $50 trillion over the next 25 years. That's $200 billion a month. I said a year this morning, I was misquoted. So it's $200 billion a month worldwide. So big dollars and big infrastructure. And we estimate that about 10% of that will be smart. It will be intelligent. It will be computers and information to make the real hard dollars more effective. Next. So how do you make people change? Because that's the way to get acceptance. We have to change our attitudes, to change our behaviors. We have to do things differently. I think increased recycling, that is caught on. Oregon was a pioneer in the United States. We instituted a bottle bill or a can bill 30 years ago. We were the first state that said, this will not be thrown away, it'll be recycled. So that has, we as Oregonians don't think about that anymore. That's our culture. There's many states that still throw this away. So it depends on location, it depends on activity, what you do. Home energy consumption and energy consumption in general, we have to change the curve of energy consumption. We have to flatten the peaks so we don't have to build so much infrastructure. And vehicle miles driven. We have to drive less, but not only in a real sense, we have to drive smarter. We have to use less energy. So there's a whole combination of, once again, changing our patterns, changing what people think about and do to impact these changes. Okay? So a couple quick examples. Charlotte, North Carolina, on the East Coast. We have gone through and instituted some portals to help the local people understand how much water they use every day. So they can go online and check businesses, and they have opportunities to discuss how they can reduce their consumption. Charlotte is hoping to reduce their water consumption by 20%. That's their goal. Next. San Francisco has incorporated a portal that looks at transportation, building energy use, and waste. You have access to information to go online and look and inquiry about your specific location. You can look at the zip code or the area you live in on what your greenhouse gas emissions are or impact are. So it's much more information for the public to help make decisions and support new infrastructure. Next. And then solar mapping, we were involved in 25 cities around the United States that we instituted a portal, wrote the program for. You could go on Google Earth, look at your house. You could see who else around you has solar panels. You could then make a calculation. How much would it cost for me to institute? How much electricity would I get? How long would I save? And how long would it take me to pay back that investment? So that's something that started in San Francisco, but it's been done in 25 cities. Okay? So I think green cities, building green cities, eco-districts need to integrate, and they're not an island, as we talked about. They have to touch and integrate to the rest. I think the example of integration here in Japan is very evident when you go through the subways up and down, shopping at things. So Japan is very sophisticated in this. Go ahead. You can go back to nature. This is a leaf development of Green City. Time's up. So, turn it off. So this is nature, a real eco-development. So go ahead and just go through the next few slides. So you have transportation of liquid, in Leaf's case, go ahead. More. Then you have intersections. then you have a development in itself, and that's a true green development. So, thank you.
So, Mr. Murasi?
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here. I would like to first start off with the first slide, please. Our firm was established in 1982, and so we're a landscape architecture firm, and we do urban design, and we also do public art. And we're based in the Pacific Northwest. We have two offices, one in Portland, Oregon, and one in Seattle, Washington. I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about my background. My father had originally started the firm, and he had studied in Japan many years ago, back in the late 60s and 70s, and I had part of my childhood upbringing in Japan. But primarily, our family moved to the Pacific Northwest, and so I like to think like some of the influences has come from Japan and the approach that we take. And anyway, maybe let's go with the first slide. The first slide, I wanted to show this because I want to talk about water being the primary topic of the work that we do. And we work with water in many different ways, but I just wanted to express that water is very powerful, such a powerful element, and that we should really think about how we, conservation and as far as a sustainable sort of approach and how we use water in the landscape. This is one of the early projects I was talking about in Japan for the Sumitomo Museum in Kyoto that my father had worked on. Next one. Next one. The next slide, please. This is a picture of my studio. It's a building similar to one of the old warehouses that Mitsu-san was talking about. It was part of the urban renewal, and I like to think like I'm part of the young creative class members in Portland as well. The interior of the next slide shows the interior space. We work with a lot of models, do a lot of mock-ups, and experiment. We like to experiment with different kind of materials and usage in the landscape. Next one, please. This is a project in the Pearl District. It's a very small project, and it's for a theater. It looks like an old building, but inside it's really, really interesting. It's a project that the GLUMAC has worked on as well, and it's called a sliver. It's a sliver park, and it's in honor of our former mayor, so it's called Veracast Park. Next one, please. And it's just a small, narrow sidewalk, which is really about the idea of capturing water, taking water from the sidewalk into these bioswales that you see on the right side, and it's all about recycling water, but on a very very small gesture. But I think the water itself can create a sense of intimacy. And so basically what the water is doing is that it's going down the slope, and it's being collected into these storm water basins. And the stone wall itself also serves as a function for benches as well. Next one, please. And here's just some other pictures. You can see that trickle of water. But it's really about placemaking and trying to really rethink how we even design just a simple sidewalk into something much more. Next one, please. And here's just an outdoor performance space and an impromptu performance that I captured. I happened to be there at the right time to get this one. Next one, please. On a larger scale, again, the use of stormwater. We're capturing stormwater from the neighborhood. This is the facility is for the Bureau of Environmental Services in Portland. They do testing in the laboratory to measure the quality of water. And for us, our role was to really really come up with an artistic statement in telling the story of the cycles of water. Next one. And so the water itself is deposited into this lake, and then once it goes into the lake, it slowly percolates into the substrate, and eventually it goes into the Willamette River beyond where the bridge is. And everything is really about the water, even the storm water from the roofs that go into the scuppers. So it's really a very educational project for people who come to visit this facility. Next one, please. Even the parking lots, as you can see, it's a very cost-effective way to do it using native plant material. And so it's very, and there's a lot of interpretive signs throughout the site as well. Next. Another water treatment facility near Portland is next to the Willamette River. We're taking water from the river, and we're treating it into this facility. But what's interesting is that the city has created a park within this site, and you can see there's a housing development adjacent to this, and so it becomes a huge amenity for the community. Next one. And you can kind of see where the water goes down the grade. Next. And this is a larger picture showing that. So it's all about recycling water again. Next. In Olympia, there's a couple of projects. One is a water treatment facility to the left and a hands-on children's museum to the right. And there's a public-private partnership in which we wanted to really talk about the theme of water and the importance of water for future and educating the children and the younger generation so that they can be stewards of the land when they grow up and pass along that whole knowledge about the importance of how we treat and how we build our landscape and properties. You see how we're trying to connect the two properties here. And the idea was to connect it to the overall water body, the Bud Inlet beyond. Next one. And here's some pictures of the entry here. We also did a sculpture at the entry as part of the project. And the next, keep going. And you can kind of see how some of the artworks have been integrated on the interior of the building. It's talking about the theme of water. Next. And on the rooftop, we've also recycled the water for the eco roof. And this last project I want to talk about, it's really about a community project. It's a small pocket park in Seattle. It's in a theater district, and it's in an open space, very small, but it's really about the day and night sort of experience for a neighborhood park. Next one. Next one. And we had gone through a public participation process in this one. It was pretty interesting. It's a Seattle Parks and Recreation project. And next one. And there's some interpretive elements that interprets the history of the site. And next one. The last slide, just again, reinforcing the sense of identity and community building, which is really is important. The open spaces, as far as really creating a sense of balance in the in the development of cities and development of neighborhoods. I think that's my cue. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Interesting. Now, after hearing different presentations, I want to ask you this, Tom. Well, Tom, as a matter of fact, he's responsible for 25 different cities. Well, the Metro is responsible for overseeing 25 cities, and he's the president of Metro. So I'll give you the perspective. The head of Tokyo Metropolitan Government, that's exactly that. Please make sure you want to take photo with him before you leave this room. He's a big name shot guy. So now, this is the person that I'm asking a question to, right? In this morning, in our session, what impressed me? Portland is a very popular city. Many more people coming in, many businesses are coming in. They are inviting businesses. So Portland is going to be a bigger city with more people. So maybe in 50 years' time, population is going to double. That's already forecasted by the government. Now, is sprawl coming back as we may anticipate? But you are managing that, right? There's a policy, so you have a strategic control or management of the growth of urban city. But the question, how do you do that? That's my first question that I wanted to ask. There's another thing that I wanted to ask. Now, presenters today, as I was hearing the presentation, one of the keywords, community is a keyword, neighborhood was another keyword, and also open space, which deliver that. So these are the keywords that still remain with me. Now, also, we had a conversation this morning that community building is not so easy as you might anticipate. We had that conversation, by the way. But if we let community do what it wants to do, does a nice community being built naturally? No. There has to be a policy or something that needs to drive a push to make a good community. Do you have any specific examples that helped bringing the community? 2 questions. Thank you.
Do you want me to start with the first? How do we manage growth? And I think that what I would emphasize is we don't control growth. Growth will happen based on other factors, most of which are out of our control. Some of them may be, we're not yet certain how the growth of our area will be impacted by global warming or global climate change, and what happens if we're a major region that has water availability and other regions that are more populated begin to go into serious decade-long drought periods, which appears quite frankly to happen. Will businesses then have to migrate and their employees along with them into Portland at a faster rate than we have anticipated? We've anticipated a significant growth. The problem is not how do you manage or how do you regulate that growth. It's what do you do with it when they come to your community. And I think that we have in place a series of benchmarks, if you will, for the land supply within what we call the urban growth boundary. The urban growth boundary being that ring that I think we looked at earlier of where urbanization can take place. The question always is, how do you get enough land into the urban growth boundary so that you don't adversely affect the price of land? Because land, like every other commodity, is driven by the law of supply and demand. And how do you measure that need? And what we have done is over every 5 years, we're required to look at the need for land in the community for housing, for commercial, and for industrial land, and then assure that we have a 20-year land supply for each of those categories. And so we have a 20-year forecast out that we look at, but we change that every 5 years. And now we've recently added another feature to that, which is urban and rural reserves that we've identified around the region, where we have said this is where we're going to expand the urban growth boundary over the next 50 years. So we have a 50-year now planning horizon in Portland, and we have planned for a very tight urban form. So as we were saying earlier, about an 11% increase over the next 50 years in the surface area that will make up the urban Portland area. But at the time that we anticipate virtually a doubling of our population. And so that means that we will guarantee the development community that wants to know what direction to take, that will give them some assurance that the type of development that will take place in the Portland metropolitan area will be a somewhat denser type of urban form than you would see in many other communities that aren't regulated by an urban growth boundary. So I think that's one important feature that we have that begins to determine what that urban form is going to be like. But then you go to your second question, which is how do you build community? Just making things more dense is not perhaps what many communities would like to see happen. We like to say in Oregon that the two things that Oregonians hate the most are sprawl and density. And they'd like to be able to live their life without either one. And of course, that isn't going to be possible. So getting community buy-in to more density involves building communities that understand what they want and understand how they want to develop as a community. And I believe, quite frankly, and I think I said this morning, that there's a couple of key elements to that government can help provide, or at least assist with providing, that we don't always think about as government responsibilities. Open space is one of those areas. Open space that connects people, that brings people together, that offers a gathering place where people from all over your town can come together, party together, listen to speeches together, look at artwork together, and develop a sense of community in doing that. Those are really key, I think, physical elements, and they aren't always green spaces. Sometimes they're hard surface spaces that can serve in a variety as home for food carts, for example, as we saw out here earlier on. The other thing that I didn't mention earlier today, by the way, that I would add, in my experience, is a focus on art is also key in that it allows each element of the community to begin to express itself in a way, and again, collaboratively with each other, so that you develop a sense of community around the various elements of the community. We're growing more diverse in our area, racially and ethnically diverse. So you can either let that become a huge problem that disrupts the community, or you can take advantage of the various cultural things that the different people bring to the community, and that is usually happens in expression through their art. And I just would say that all of that revolves a delicate balance, and working with public-private partnerships, NGOs, everybody in the community kind of getting on the same page, and that's something that you can't order. You can't just order everybody to show up and announce to them what the plans are, and then have everybody march out of the room in lockstep. At least that doesn't happen very much in Oregon, and I don't think it happens very many other places. So there has to be an iterative process back and forth between the folks who are planning this and the community, so that the plan always fits what the community needs. And then at the end of the day, that plan also has to work. So you can't just draw pretty pictures. You have to be able to implement something that will actually work. And so, it's not easy.
Well, thank you.
今日ですね、このトークセッションはですね、4時に終わらないといけないので、
Today's talk session, we have to conclude at 4 p.m., so we only have 37 minutes to be exact. So we'd like to solicit questions from the floor within those 37 minutes. So actually, we would have 20 minutes for a Q&A session. If that's the case, we only have 17 minutes for our panel discussion. So the participants here come from community building, the residents' participation. I think a lot of the participants here are interested in these topics. So what the government can do as of now, I think we've heard about that from your comment. So what about from the private side, from the private sector? How can the private sector help in developing the community building? If we can have maybe concrete examples, if I don't know who I should ask the question to. So Charles, I think you've been appointed as the representative of the private sector to support the community building. So if you can share with us any concrete examples, that would be very helpful.
Oftentimes, the private sector is blindsided by the community. What we find is that some private sector reach out to the community, and some feel like they don't need to talk to the community. And oftentimes, the people who feel like they don't talk to the community are often surprised when the community is telling them why they shouldn't build anything in their neighborhood. And that's the last thing a private interest wants to hear. What they want to hear is, my project's going to move smoothly. So one instance was in Seattle, Seattle Children's Hospital, which you would think that Seattle Children's, because it treats children, that everyone would be accepting of a more than doubling of their hospital in an affluent neighborhood. And quite frankly, the neighborhood was not excited by having the hospital more than double in its neighborhood. And it really caught the hospital off guard, though they knew that were people in the neighborhood who would be against any development at all. It didn't surprise them that they would be very angry at more than double. What transpired was a reconciliation of expectation between what the community would expect in return for development in their neighborhood. And we helped them find community benefits in the things that Seattle Children's would do naturally as their day-to-day operations that actually would supplement the lives of the community. And in that way, we formed a bridge. It was some improvements that, you wouldn't have to do in Dallas, Texas, but it was something you might have to do in Portland, or something a little bit more sensitive, maybe something more you do in Tokyo, where you would be more careful about what impacts you make. But there was an expectation that they had broad freedom to do whatever they wanted, and a neighborhood let them know that they did not.
Thank you very much for.
それと私の方からまたアトランダムの質問になるんですが、
Random from myself. It's making use of the open space to promote the community building. So from that point of view, what about the fees to support, the funds to support the development of the open space? Are you okay with the translation equipment? Yes.
オープンスペースを使って活動をしていくときにですね。
So in order to conduct activities to develop open space, obviously that requires money.
ですね、例えばさっきの TIF
So I think there was a mechanism, TIF. So would the cost, would the funds be provided from mechanisms such as TIF?
活発にしていくためのですね、一番重要なのはですね、そういったお金をどういうふうに調達する
So basically the funding. How would that come about? Because unless you have the funding, these activities will not last on a long-term basis. And of course, we do experience that here in Japan as well.
ハードとして作ったものをどう
So as you try to develop the open space, as you develop the open space as a hardware, so you need to have the planners to develop those hardware. And of course, you need those who will be responsible for the fundraising as well. So if you can give us any concrete examples. How?
I can give a couple of concrete examples. One from the city of Hillsborough, where I used to be mayor. We implemented a tool for the acquisition of parklands that's called a systems development charge. And it's often used in water systems and even in transportation systems. But several cities at the time, including ourselves, implemented a charge that goes on each house that is purchased that then goes into a fund to buy parkland. But as you've identified, the difficulty then is we had money to increase the number of acres of farmland or of parkland that we had within the city limits, but we quickly ran out of the money to maintain and operate those parks, and so we've had to go back to the voters with a property tax levy, a special levy that, oddly enough, provides more police, more fire, and more park maintenance. Those are the three items that are in that levy. That was the city of Hillsborough. The Metro, which I now have moved up to or over to, was empowered by the voters back in 1995 and then again in 2006 to do what we call general obligation bonds, which means that we can we can sell bonds to lenders and then pay those bonds back with property tax levies, specific property tax levies on all of the property, real property within the region. We acquired the ability to buy a significant amount of land to protect habitat, to preserve water quality features, and now own about 16,000 acres of parkland in the Portland metropolitan region. And if you'll remember, I was saying before that's out of about 265,000 acres, so it's not an insignificant amount, but it has now gone beyond our budget to do the maintenance, and so we're going back to the voters next month, actually, for requests to add a small amount onto the property tax to collect about $9 to $10 million a year to do the maintenance and operation of the open spaces. But you're correct, particularly living open spaces, you can't just create them and then walk away from them because the grass grows, the trees need to be pruned, other things need to be taken care of, and those are also expensive.
ちょっといいですか。ポートランド市の方の
So this is about the city of Portland from our point of view. So I have not been involved in the maintenance of the Greenland, but in terms of the development phasing, so in terms of developing the public space, or as we try to redevelop the region, these public space or open space would definitely form a core part of the city planning. So what is important here is the initial investment. So at the initial phase of planning, in the case of Portland, we do have a long-term redevelopment contract. So this is an official contract between PDC and the developers. So at that time, there will be a master plan been devised. So the parks land, the contract will endorse that the land will be acquired by developers. But the public transit or public roads or the public parking lots, those parts will be taken care of by PDC. So we actually share the responsibilities within the master plan. So at the onset, we try to decide and allocate different roles amongst PDC as opposed to the developers. So wherever we can use our public money, we would do so. So we do have that scheme within the city of Portland. Also, in terms of the continuous maintenance of the parks, that was one of the topics. So we do have a Bureau of Park. They would take care of the monitoring, and they do have a couple hundreds of headcounts to maintain the parks on a citywide basis. Thank you very much for that. Also, Tom, he's mentioned about MPO and NGO playing a fairly important role. I think that was a comment that we heard from Tom. So is it, how is the NGO being formed? Are they been established on a voluntarily basis, or is there a mechanism to really promote the establishment of NGOs?
Yeah, I think it has largely been on a voluntary basis and then based on a need that is perceived in the community. And they run the full range of organizations that worry about healthcare, protection of the environment, working with children, families in need. Some things that government does and some things that government doesn't do. And the NGOs either help with that or in fact, do some of the features. I think that it goes back again to, I think, something you mentioned earlier about the triple bottom line, that is an element that we really haven't talked about as we talk about urban planning, you've got to look at both the environmental issues and the business issues, the dollar, the financial issues, and then also the social issues. And so one of the things that my agency is charged with assuring is that as we grow and as we develop, that the burdens of growth won't be too heavily placed on any one part of the community, and though the benefits go to any one part of the community. And the equity part of that is very difficult. And we have a lot of nonprofits in the community who have made racial justice and economic justice their cause that will help us, although sometimes it might not feel like help, address those issues of equity as we go forward with our policy.
補足ですが、
And I'd like to just add a comment. In Portland, they're talking about NPO. We have relatively more NPOs than other cities for the size of the city that we are in. And I lived in different cities in the United States. But people is very important. And people in Portland, I think we have many people in Portland that are not so capitalistic, people-oriented people. So it's not like, let's make something big, trying to sell so that I can be rich. And they tend to go to California or New York after a while. So the nature of people in Portland is, I don't have to be excessively rich, but I want to enjoy life. I don't want to bully environment. I think we see more people in that personalities. So if you're building a building, but now if you want to build a new building, let's try to make a energy efficient building. But energy efficient building is more expensive than regular building. So there's something called Energy Trust Oregon. That's a non-profit organization. They basically pitch in the money, the loan. You know, they basically help the financing. So that mechanism is available in Portland. Why? Well, now states and the region and the local governments have delineated the policies clearly. So in some case, government making money or paying money would raise a dispute. So why not in this case NPO comes in? So we nominate like NPO and they work, but we help finance that NPO. Or we make a build, collectively make a plan involving gas company or utility companies, right? So everybody pitches in. And that is one of the dynamics that is significantly more apparent in Portland than any other cities.
フロアにですね、
Well, thank you. Before I ask questions, let audience ask question. Before that, I just want to ask something in the end. The last gentleman in the front, Kirk Davis-san. I just want to make sure you speak something before you go back, since you're here in the front. So I would like to ask you a question. Now, government and private, Kirk, from your perspective, do you have any requests to private firms? Do you have requests that will help you on your day-to-day or their regular work? Or do you have excellent relationship? You have nothing to complain. Is that so? Or if you have any request at all? Like a PPP, right? Public-private partnership, right? PPP, that relationship under this PPP, do you think it's working wonderfully? But on a day-to-day basis, collaboration between private and public, do you think it's working well? Well, if it's working perfectly, what are the things that helped become perfect?
Wow. I think we are very fortunate in Portland that we do have a very good relationship in terms of public-private partnerships. Nothing ever works perfectly. So I think that the biggest challenge we have is obviously, with the financial crisis that we've just gone through in the last several years, we're slowly coming out of that. But a lot of things have been mentioned here by my compatriots that I think have led to the success that we have seen in Portland. The government, starting with urban renewal districts and encouraging private developers to be brave enough to do things that are outside of the normal. We've mentioned on a couple of occasions the brewery blocks, at least I have. I was very fortunate to walk that part of town probably in 1998 before the developer bought the property. And it was very, very run down. And today it's probably one of the most vibrant parts of the city. And it was a catalyst to other development. In terms of creating these open spaces that create the opportunity for community and neighborhood, again, I think that the people that are in charge are very smart in encouraging additional opportunities for developers through what are called FAR adjustments, floor area ratio adjustments. So from a zoning standpoint, there's a certain maximum you can build on any site. And by virtue of a developer saying, okay, I will build a park or I will build a larger plaza for the public good, they are in turn rewarded on the economic side of the triple bottom line by being able to build a larger building, a taller building, for example. I've seen that not only in Portland, but also in a project we did in Los Angeles. So, and then just to touch a little bit on what Mitsu-san talked about with the ETO, every ratepayer, everybody that pays a bill for their power within the metro area pays into this fund, which is used to encourage the application of these energy strategies. And so it takes all of these things working together to be successful. And I think we've just been very fortunate with some far-sighted thinking. People a lot smarter than me. I'm just an electrical engineer to make these things work. So, you know, frankly, I'm not coming up with any major criticisms of our process, other than I just wish there was more money in the pool.
So
now, your question. Now, I want to talk slightly from public perspective. Now, as a matter of fact, I've been to Portland only for the last 12 months, a few days plus 12 months. Before that, I was just going one place to another within the United States, and I was working at consultant for public office, or commerce of the local commerce organization. Now, PPP relationship to your question. Now, this meeting today is a great example, right? Because we have many different people from public, private, and you must be thinking, wow, that must be hard to coordinate that. Not really, because we are good friends. They are good friends who have experience, who goes back years. So if you just simply ask a question, say, now here's this idea, and then there's a guy called Charles Kelly. You want to talk to him, and go to Charles, and Dick is there, and Murase's office is working. So let's talk with the son of Mr. Murase. So it's easy as that. Of course, it's not cheap to coordinate that. We are not really financing from public. They are paying off of their money, right? But the Portland as a city, Portland as a community, they are a big fan of Portland, so they want to help. And we help the branding of the Portland. And if the brand is even better for the brand of the Portland, then it's good for the business. Now, our goal is double export. But they were helping us because they want to help Portland's image improve even farther than today. And it's, I think, unique essence of Portland. And of course, we are very happy if we can win the project in Japan. So raise me. Wow. I wish I was in your place, Portland's place. Now we only have 15
皆様の方からですね、いろいろご質問いただければなというふうに思っております。多分3人から4人ぐらいしか、時間がないんじゃないかなと思いつつ、手短に挙手をいただければと思いますが、じゃあどうぞ、3番目の方。
すみません、銀座西並木通り会の谷と申します。ちょっとコミュニティ作りということで一点お伺いしたいのですが、日本の場合コミュニティというと、伝統的な地縁の町会というものと、商業団体であるところの、商店会でございまして、どちらかというと、ポートランドのネイバーフッドで活動して
The Portland's neighborhoods type of district. I think it's equivalent of what we see in the shopping district and the Shopping Districts Association. So when we try to conduct various activities within the shopping district, as in the neighborhood, it's really difficult to convene a meeting. And quite often we see a difference in the capability of the different communities, and that relates to the vitality of the individual community. So I live in Ginza area. And of course, I've been working in this area for some time to enhance the brand equity of the city of Ginza. But those of you, some of them who are coming from outside, they only capture the merit of the community, so they only reap, but they do not contribute to the community. We are seeing more and more of those residents who are coming in from outside. We see that as an issue. So those of us who are highly conscious of enhancing the brand equity, we would have to bear all the burden. And those who come in from outside, they just reap on the benefit and do not help at all. And quite often we might not have any residents at all in this particular district. So, and the administration itself, obviously, they do not have the residents there, so they don't see them as potential voters either. So BAD, I think that is an important scheme to explore. I do study that concept, but I think it's really difficult to employ BID concept in Japan as is. So BID. So what sort of approach can we possibly explore? And how could the government should involve in these shopping districts in order to revitalize the area? So if you can give us some feedback or comments.
I'd say most of the development at an urban scale involves some kind of organizing within the community to collect what the aspirations are of that community, and in some ways, getting people to talk and giving them venues to talk and giving them also requires holding events, or we call it community building events, and PDC is involved in some of those, but mostly the city of Portland. My wife works for the Office of Neighborhood Involvement in the city of Portland, and their role is, she's a landscape architect, but she has an interest in sociology. She wants to improve the landscape through the actions and collective actions of a community who are connected in different ways around different kinds of projects. So for anti-graffiti, there is a group of people who work on that. There's people who are concerned about parking or trash. There's you start with the thing that they all share, and then you keep increasing the conversation until it gets to weightier matters. It doesn't come overnight, and I think Tom said that earlier, but there has to be sort of a conversation, and then there has to be, you have to find someone who's inclined to make emails and call and kind of provide some leadership. My wife and her role at the city, it's sort of the job of, she helps facilitate some of those meeting coordinations and having venues where people can meet. It's very helpful in this process. And it makes it so people understand when they're making an improvement in one district, right? They have sympathy for what it takes to when everyone has a neighborhood association in their meeting, they understand in sympathy with other people's lift and how hard it is to do it. And so they're more accepting of spending money, and they're more accepting of their collective action and what's important to them. So I hope I answered your question, but I think you just start small and you just keep working.
That answers your question? Yes? Anybody else? Does anybody have that question? I see a hand at the back.
Portland is what in Japanese we would call chihotoshi. It's a middle-sized city, but it's as soon as you leave the city limits, it's very rural. And to have the population double is unthinkable in Japan, and it's, I think, a big problem in how Japanese civil planning is working these days. We really need a way to keep young people in these rural cities, because it's an aging population. We're having these problems, and I think Portland is unique in that it does a very good job of drawing young people. And in Japan, all of the young people go from these chihotoshi to the big cities like Tokyo. And I was wondering if you could give concrete examples, if you could perhaps propose ways that Japanese cities could draw these young people to these cities, because Portland is much smaller than Tokyo, and I think comparing them directly is quite difficult.
I'll take the first part. You can just follow up. ですね。
Well, the first of all,
まず
first, I am a Japanese. I was brought up in Japan, so I know what's happening in Japan quite well. And I'm actually from rural person. I'm from Mito City of Ibaraki Prefecture, so I'm one of the persons who came from rural place to big city. But I went back to rural places in the United States, and I'm working in a local government. So in that sense, I'm a little different from typical Japanese youngsters. Portlanders are not really working aggressively hard to invite young people. Young people coming in naturally, although there's not much, even though they may not have employment from the beginning.
Portland doesn't draw young people. People doesn't call them, they go, and that's kind of the thing that needs to be done. It's not about 呼ばれてるんじゃないんですよね.
They're not being called.
Makes them want to go. Makes them want to, and I think that's the big difference.
So if you let me answer the question. So, what I was going to say was, okay. だから人を呼び込むような活動をしてます。
So we are not calling, right? No specific activities to calling them. We are not really putting a framework. But what we are doing passionately is to create an environment where people are happy to be in for the frameworks that as Tom has said, over the last 40 years and above. And young people come in that environment because they are coming in and living in an environment that are nice or sustainable environment. Of course, they do not have a job when they come in, so they do something that they would like to do. They make money, but very small amount of money. But the young creative classes are coming into some district. And of course, the economy is not really well, so job availability is not that wonderful. Pretty much everywhere is the same. But they come to the city without having a job. Wow, but it's nice. It's not as expensive as New York or Los Angeles. I don't need to own a car. And then through the course of days and years, they built a community or the friendship within the people in the community. And then they share that story, and their friends come in from outside of Portland to Portland. And we are seeing that dynamics in Portland. So in the English phrase, we are not building industry, we are building place.
You create a place where people want to live. という状態が
And that's, well, in PDC we call it seismic shift. How people think changed, how people in the bureau think changed. And that's why I am given this opportunity. 20 years ago, I have no chance of walking in this office. And Tom, maybe you want to add.
Well, I think one of the other things that Portland has been able to do, and again, I don't think it's necessarily with an eye towards attracting the creative class, but it's helped is if you're not a big city, you have to have some of the amenities that big cities have. And in the United States, that means some level of professional sports. So in our case, basketball team, soccer team. We have a very good ballet, a very good symphony. We have several performance venues, not just in Portland but around the region for dramatic performance and other things. We also have a huge restaurant class that keeps getting. Somehow the New York Times has fallen in love with Portland and has published our restaurants, given a lot of exposure to our restaurants, and a great wine culture, which again, all of those things, and brew pubs, all of those things really attract people, particularly younger, creative people, to the community. So it's a combination, I think, of that small city feel. You don't feel like you get lost in Portland, with the kind of amenities that you'd find in a city that's much larger than Portland. That makes it attractive.
Hi, 後ろの方。
So I think we have a question in the back. This could be the last question, given the limitation of time. Good afternoon. I came all the way from Kagoshima. I took the first flight out in order to attend this meeting. So 20 years ago, first time I visited the United States, it was in Portland. I was quite impressed. There was a lake right close to the city. You can actually swim in there. I really fell in love with this place. But in the previous talk, we talked about Portland's government. It's already foreseeing 20 years ahead. You're very much proactive. I think that was part of the points mentioned in the presentation. Take for Japan, though. The governor, they actually change hands every 4 years. So their term is only 4 years. So chances are their policy might change in the course of 4 years. It's really short span. But Portland, 20 years, when I visited the first time, but still you have a long-term span plan. So my biggest question is, why was Portland be able to develop and grow on a sustainable basis? Why have you been able to do so? That is the question that I really wanted to ask.
Well, yeah. First of all, I have to say that I'm limited to 2 terms, so I'm limited to 8 years. So that's twice as much as a governor in Japan, which means I can get in twice as much trouble, I think. Some of it's just luck. Some of it is just what nature has given us. A beautiful environment, snow-capped mountains, a magnificent river, proximity to an amazing act of nature in the Columbia River Gorge, proximity to the beach, all of those things kind of help. And then I think it is a dedication that the citizens have always had to making sure that stays as much the way it is as it can be, and a recognition that we are very, very fortunate to have those things, and a sense that we need to be good stewards of that. And then governments who are elected by a public who want those values to be enforced, that then has to find the policy that brings them to fruition. So I think that combination has really created an environment where elected officials come and go, but the policy and where the public want us to go has remained pretty much stayed the course for most of my life in public service.
でちょっと補足としては、ポートランド市に限って
As far as the city of Portland is concerned, every 4 years, the mayor, there's election. So there's an election every 4 years. But from the point of view of PDC, the staff of PDC, especially those in the senior class, the upper management class of PDC, unless the mayor deemed them useless, or maybe the mayor deemed he's overly close to the previous mayor, chances are they would stay in business. So the long-term business plan, chances are they will be sustained. And of course, there would be some people like myself who are in charge of various strategy. We are quite expected to remain in that position so that policy and strategy will be continued. So that's completely separate from the roles, responsibilities of mayor. So we know that from the point of view of PDC. So I think that was also helpful. So even though the head of the district or the region might change, those policies will be sustained as well. But it is true, there is an opportunity, or there is a possibility, let's just put it that way, that the plans might change. But it is true that the plans that was established by the consensus of the community, it is fairly difficult to change. So even if you don't have a job, if you might fly in from Kagoshima to Portland, if you migrate to Portland, you might be able to get a job. You might be able to appreciate more the beauty and the goodness of Portland.
これまで成功している理由を
Anybody on the panel who wants to make sure you say something about the success factors of Portland?
簡単にブリーフリーで
Briefly, please, right?
Yes, very briefly. I think it's continuation of the comment we just had of why we can plan. Don't forget, every location goes through hard times. 20 to 30 years ago, we were agricultural and we cut trees, timber. We don't do that anymore. We still have some agriculture, but we have completely had to change. And I think the tough times bring you together, that you can be consistent in your planning and message.
I'd just like to add a few words here. Just in terms of the park system in Portland, there have been many visionaries in the past, city governments and working collaboratively with the political side of things to really promote the open space networks. And it was done, back in the 70s. There's a whole series of these pocket parks. I'm just thinking out loud. Within downtown, there's this Pettygrove Park, Lovejoy Park, and then there's a whole series of sort of like these dots that are sort of interconnected. And then also the waterfront park. It's such a beautiful, beautiful place to, when you arrive in the city, it's just like it's like our front door. The waterfront park along the riverfront, and there's just culture of Portlanders who just love to walk outside and just really enjoy, just in terms of enjoyment, just not just for walking for the sake of walking. From, of course, you're going to school or you're going to work and so forth, but just the act of taking your family out on a stroll, taking your kids, riding your bike, and getting some exercise too, of course. So these open space systems are all connected, and within the scale of the city, which has been established since our founding. The grid system, which is only a 200-foot block grid distance, which makes it very, very walkable, and so it's very traffic oriented, foot oriented. So you see. You really tend to enjoy that and the scale of the city, and so that's from the landscape perspective. That's and then there's a lot of water features, and a lot of the success for a lot of the parks, successful parks have water. That's really one of the basic elements, I would say, water and some nice trees. for shade. And so, it would promote people just lingering around, sitting underneath the trees, getting underneath the shade. When the sun is out during the autumn and the cooler months, people want to get out in the sun, get southern exposure. So all these parks were each one of them are very different in character, from being very passive to very active to or in between. So I think there's a wonderful sense of that balance in terms of that. Thank you.
ありがとうございます。
Well, thank you. It's time. Actually, we spent 5 minutes more than we are supposed to. So I'm sad to say, but I have to cut off discussion right here, right now. But before we close, I actually want to make a comment. As I said at the very beginning, they are having an eye on 20, 30, 40 years from today in forming policies. Sustainability has to be a big part of it, economically, environmentally. And one of the things that left with me today, listening to you, is planning based on community, which are all working effectively. That's my comment. And also mechanism to deliver the policy, PPP, public-private partnership, and financing mechanism to support that. And we learned TIF. And also one of the person asked BID, Business Improvement District. And earlier, Tom talked about investments to community or the program for community. Basically raising a tax, levy more tax to help community, right? So levying, like you are making people pay more money, but that money is going back to the community. That framework, I thought, personally, was one of the very effective success factors. And another thing that left with me very strongly is open space, network of open spaces. And an open space become very important or effective vehicle of where people get around to come together and have conversation. And another thing that leadership from policymakers. Well, the conclusion is everything have to come together comprehensively to work this success that Portland's enjoying. So nobody can explain it in one simple words or phrase. But what's important is planning with community, policy with community. I think these are the key messages that we should be learning and take away today. Now, I apologize that my facilitation is not that good. I spend overtime, but we learned many initiatives from Portland, and we all sensed passion from Portland. And there are many ideas that we should seriously take a look at. And maybe let's continue to communicate between Japan and Portland so that we can continue to learn from you. So, sustainable contacting, right? That's my hope before we wrap up. So, everyone on the audience, we are actually a big group of people, and thank you very much for being with us. And it was a you enjoyed the passionate discussion, and thank you for being with us till the end. Now, 6 wonderful panelists. Let's give it up before we end today. Well, if we are serious about making this keep in touch, if anybody has a question, what should do?
なるほど。
I see. I see.
コンタクトを取りたい方は
So if you want to ask question, Yamazaki-san from PDC is a good contact point. If you want to have a direct dialogue, maybe you can exchange business card during the networking reception as an idea. So let's go back to the moderator, facilitator.
Thank you very much, the panelists, and also Mr. Inoue, the moderator. Would you give a round of applause to everyone? So we started this session at 1:30, PDC Portland. We Build Green Cities Portland Conference. Again, we're approaching the end of the conference. So between Tokyo and Portland, if you take the direct flight from Delta, it's only about 10-hour flight. However, having said that, it is not so easy to travel from one city to the other. So this time around, we have the top runners, the green industry. This is a valuable opportunity that everyone has met here. So this is an important time for networking. So we do have some time to further your networking activities. So we have the Portland roasting coffee, and as well as Suite of Oregon's confectionery as well. So it's only until 4:45, but please.